Mark, we're leading what's called Moving Back in the Neighborhood, and people keep asking, what's it about, and what are you doing? And I've been thinking about that, and a little while ago, a friend of mine who's a pastor, we were sitting having coffee together, and he told me this story. He said, Al, I really take it seriously, this fact that as a church we need to be connected with our community. So he said, I've been having coffee for the last 4 or 5 weeks just down the street from the church. And I met this lady in the coffee shop who's just moved into the community. A lot of condos, expensive condos. And we've been talking, and she's been telling me that she loves the community. Lots of stuff going on, but she's having a hard time getting to know people and wants to find ways of connecting. And now he told me, she's probably in her early 60s, Anglo-Saxon, kind of white, Protestant, middle-class person. So he said to her, our church is just up the street. We're a wonderful group of people. We love to welcome people. Why don't you come and visit us on a Sunday morning? And the woman stopped, and she was very gracious, and she said to him, Gary, I wouldn't know how to do that. And he kind of looked, what do you mean? And she said, I have never stepped a foot inside a church like that. I would not know how to cross the threshold into a place like that. And he just went,
it's way too strange.
Yeah.
Way too strange.
Yeah. And anyway.
In our Presbyterian community, in our community around our Presbyterian church, not uncommon for a lot of our churches, the neighborhood has changed since the church was planted.
Yeah.
And in that context, we keep asking the same thing, how do we connect here? No big plans other than we do an annual festival. It's just kind of part of our life. And we put up the banners and tell the neighbors they're welcome, and they kind of know they're kind of welcome.
Yeah.
And not long ago then, the elders said, well, at least we ought to, we create a parking havoc around here because all of our cousins and everybody comes back. So we're going to go talk to some of the neighbors, just say, come over for a free chicken dinner, and we're sorry for the parking, and we want to be friends, whatever we want to say.
Yeah.
So one of the elders went literally less than half a block away, knocked on a door, and introduced herself. Her name is Ivy, good friend, dear woman. She said, my name is Ivy, and I'm from the Presbyterian Church across the street. And the woman who answered the door, African-American, just amazing woman, we've gotten to know her now, she starts laughing. And she says, you'll never believe this. My name is Ivy too.
Yeah.
Did you say you're from that church across the street? Ivy from the church says yes. Neighbor Ivy says, listen to the pronouns. We've been wondering when you were going to come out into the neighborhood. Now this church has been there for decades.
Yeah.
We've been watching you. You come for your funerals, you get in your car and leave. You come for worship, you get in your cars and leave. We've been wondering, she's been talking with the neighbors, when you're going to come out into the neighborhood. And it was just a stunning sense. We're watched, they know our job better than we do, and we're not out there. The next week is really interesting because Church Ivy brought the pastor over to introduce her to this new friend. And the pastor introduced himself, and neighbor Ivy is ready for a conversation here. Says, the Joneses across the street? They've been wondering about where to go to church. And she just kind of went down, she knows these neighbors.
She knows them, yeah.
And they're all talking about us.
Yeah.
And we didn't even know that.
Yeah.
And so just this initial step into a community where we're the strangers.
Right.
We're the strangers.
Yeah.
And we've been welcomed in now to conversations.
So, what I say to people is moving back into the neighborhood is about the fact that a lot of our churches are like the ones you just described, the ones I described.
That's right.
They want to connect. But there's a sense of, what do we need to do to connect with people out there to get them to come here? And it's not working.
Right.
And so moving back into the neighborhood is providing people in our churches some very practical tools for how they can listen to and enter into and connect with people in the community to see what God's up to.
It's that key theological issue,
Yeah.
and especially those of us, I'm in a Reformed tradition church, and we claim that God is doing all kind of things, providence,
Yeah.
all of that. And if we really believe, as our church just stumbled onto, the Spirit of God's ahead of us in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we don't need a strategic plan to go do that. We don't need a committee to do that. What we need to do is act into the theology we believe in, and then be watching for what God is already doing. And it's so different than coming up with plans and outcomes and budgets and such. And as we've seen, we've been in downstate Illinois, we've been in Southern California, Atlanta, the Northwest, every place we've gone. This is not a hugely different story wherever we've been.
That's right.
And we're finding the churches that deep in their hearts want to connect with the life of God out there. And as we walk through these weekends together, we're seeing those stories and finding ways to help that happen.
So moving back to the neighborhood, it's Friday night, Saturday, and it's a way in which local churches can discover some of the tools and the resources and the stories amongst themselves to engage with neighborhoods and communities, discover and join with what God is up to already.
That's right. It's already, God's ahead of us.
Yep.
We're starting to discern how that happens. It works best if pastor or other staff and a bunch of other leaders or members come together.
As a
we
team.
work around the table,
Yep.
we work with scripture,
Yep.
we work with stories, and we see a way forward.
Yep.
Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, my friend.